Abolish buy-to-let landlords. That apparently is the solution to the UK housing crisis, according to housing barrister Nick Bano, as reported in the loony left Guardian. Now we're going to deep dive into the lunacy of this argument in this video, but first here's a peek at what Nick Bano has to say.
A lot of landlords see themselves as good people. They are participating in an immensely harmful economic system. We've got to make it embarrassing to be a landlord again. We've got to rediscover a sense of shame and a sense of direct participation in the harm that we see around us today. They seem to think that they're entitled to respect, and I just feel that like the law is on their side, economics is on their side, the politicians are on their side, the courts are on their side. The idea that we shouldn't mock them and humiliate them and make them feel ashamed is laughable. Britain's wealth is rooted in landlordism, and that's a dangerous place to be in.
So there you have it, a member of the legal profession suggesting that it's shameful to be a landlord, it's shameful to provide housing for people. Now I'm sure you guys are going to have a lot to say about this article, so make sure you comment below and tell me what you think of this Guardian article. And if you want to keep up to date with our new videos, we put out 3 videos each and every week, so subscribe and hit the bell icon so you're notified when we publish a new one. So one of Nick Bano's arguments is that there isn't a shortage of property in the UK. Nick Bano argues that the UK has more than enough housing supply.
Is that why you've just written for The Guardian about how we don't need more supply?
Yeah, it really touched a nerve. The supply issue is really kind of a throwaway line in the book. I just had this quick justification of why I'm not talking about supply. But I feel that supply has dominated the discourse for so long that people found it really surprising. A lot of people found it quite upsetting and shocking that you challenge the accepted wisdom, that you kind of put the property developers to proof that there is this massive shortage, because that's not really what the stats bear out if we look at Britain in historical terms or if we look at the UK in comparative international terms.
Really, Mr. Bano? Let's have a... You didn't actually quote any stats, you just spouted nonsense. Let me spout some stats for you, Mr. Bano. Now we know that the UK needs 300,000 new dwellings per year, and we're not even building half that amount. Here is some research produced by the Resolution Foundation for the UN, published in the Financial Times. And what it does is it compares housing stock in major countries per 1,000 inhabitants. And you can see here, the UK is the lowest. France has 775 per 1,000 population, Germany 624, Japan 594, and UK at 576. So there you are, Mr. Bano. We have some real statistics there. Now tell me what you think in the comments below. So you can see where this is going. This article and the words of Mr. Bano is just based on communism, Marxism, lefty propaganda. And you can tell a lot about the direction of travel in the Guardian article from the picture they've chosen to use. Now, do you know of a street that looks like this in the UK where you have buy-to-let rental property? Probably not. It's just some Victorian library pic taken out to invoke a negative emotion regarding buy-to-let landlords. Now, the pre-Margaret Thatcher era in the 1970s was a golden era, according to Nick Bano. Let's take a look back in the 1970s. In 1971, UK home ownership was at 50%. And that meant 50% of people were in rental accommodation, but they were in social housing. That means you had one choice of renter, which was your local authority. Absolutely no competition in regards provision of housing, and certainly not the top housing quality standards. So what Mr. Bano seems to want is a return to that 70s era. Now in the 1970s, councils went up and down the land, went around buying up private housing to basically provide social housing to people. What Bano wants to do is rob you of your property, your hard-earned property investment. What he wants to do is create the conditions where your property is basically unprofitable to let out, and for the state to basically come in and offer you peanuts for it.
Landlords apparently decide that they don't want to rent their homes out anymore. So what's the solution to that?
Well, this is, I mean, I sort of take them at their word, and this is exactly what happened in the previous century, that Where it became unprofitable to be a landlord, they sold up. And that was generally seen to be a good thing because it means more owner-occupiers. It means more ability for local authorities to buy properties and repurpose them or redevelop them as council tenancies. And it just means people, like more people living in better forms of tenure than the private rented sector, which is by far the worst.
Do you think that councils would want to repurchase private property?
We know that they did. We know that they spent a lot of the 70s and 80s doing exactly that. Of course, things are a bit different now, but I mean, local politicians fall over themselves to promise more social housing. And if landlords were having to sell up at bargain basement prices, it's a good opportunity for local authorities.
Now, let's not mince words here. Let's actually understand what Nick Bano is saying. Nick Bano is advocating a state-sanctioned theft of property, which is no different from what the Bolsheviks did in the Russian Revolution. It's no different from what Robert Mugabe did to white farmers in Zimbabwe. It is the state saying that you have no right to the property that you have. And I've said this earlier in the video, what would happen if we went back to the 1970s and 1980s? If you were living in a property that was owned by your local authority, do you really think you're going to get satisfactory living standards out of them? And remember, one of the big problems in the 1970s and 80s was, yes, there was social housing for the people that absolutely needed it. But what about the people who didn't need social housing provision, who had good jobs and income, but simply didn't want to buy? There are many people who need to be in a particular locality, but don't want to buy in that locality because they don't envisage being there for a long period of time. Buying a property obviously is a commitment. There are a lot of upfront sunk costs, such as stamp duty, for example, and moving costs and all the rest of it, legal costs, mortgage arrangement fees and this and that. You also have to put up a substantial deposit to buy your own home. That is only worth doing if you want to live in that area for a long period of time. So where do people that don't want to buy, that don't meet the criteria for social housing provision, go in Nick Bano's new utopia for rental housing? Now, I'll put a link to this Guardian article in the description for this video so you can read it, but let me know what you think in the comments below. He goes on to say in the article that 1 in 21 adults in the UK is a buy-to-let landlord, and that we have 4 times as many buy-to-let landlords as we do teachers. Well, the fact that there are so many landlords in the country means that there's a huge amount of diversity in the product that is out there, in the different types of rental housing up and down the land. And that gives people genuine choice. What choice in rental housing was there in the 1970s and 80s?
Part of the way in which landlordism was made acceptable was by these TV programs that were just endlessly on in the 2000s about playing the property game and how gentle they made it look, how acceptable they made it look. And if we rediscover a sense of revulsion, if we replace those with TV programs about just how horrible it feels when you don't know if the landlord is going to kick you out or fix the mold for your own benefit, I would hope that people take that sense of shame on board and choose not to.
So really, Mr. Bano, on the one side, there are TV programs that say, well, you know what, you can better your life, you can better your future by investing in property, by developing properties, by taking, like say with Homes Under the Hammer, taking some derelict property that you take entrepreneurial risk on to buy at auction. And you spend your time and your efforts and your energies doing it up. And then you either sell it on or rent it out. That is your work, your efforts, the fruits of your labour. Why shouldn't you make a profit on it? It's certainly a lot more interesting looking at rented property with mould. But how many of these properties are actually like that? Mr. Bano, of course, presents no statistical evidence, but let me give you some stats. The NRLA produces an annual survey of tenants, of rent-paying tenants in England and Wales, and they survey 2,000 tenants. And in their survey, 58% of tenants rate their landlord either 8, 9 or 10 out of 10. Only 7% rate their landlord at 0, 1 or 2 out of 10. So satisfaction is high. And just because there may be 1 or 2 rogue landlords out there, you don't paint all landlords with the same brush. If you have one bad builder or one bad bus driver, you wouldn't say, let's ban all builders and ban all bus drivers, would you? But remember those 1 in 21 UK adults who are small-time buy-to-let landlords that Nick Bano is deriding and complaining about. These may be, for example, a teacher with a couple of buy-to-lets on the side. Perhaps they've bought them as an investment vehicle or for pension in their later years. Well, the tenant satisfaction survey actually shows that satisfaction among tenants who have private, independent landlords is higher. So congratulations if you're one of those 1 in 21 UK population who have a buy-to-let property. You're doing much better at being a landlord than the state.
I wouldn't like there to be a situation in which it's the choice of that generation. I would prefer to create the conditions in which it isn't profitable for them to be landlords, in which it makes no sense for them to be landlords, and that they should sell up either to someone who's going to live in the house themselves or to someone who's going to do something more socially productive with it, like repurpose it as social housing.
So what do you guys think of this Nick Bano character? Let me know in the comments below. Also, smash that like button if you're liking this video. Don't forget to subscribe to be kept up to date when we release more. So let's have a listen to some more of his nonsense, and I'll debunk this one as well.
What generates the vast house prices is the idea that if you're selling your house, you have to sell it to someone who may or may not be a landlord. So anyone buying it would have to at least compete with a landlord who's able to command these extravagant rents. So that the rented sector is intimately tied in to the housing market more broadly. Mm-hmm.
Well, this is, of course, complete nonsense. You will know, as a buy-to-let investor, that in virtually every area of the country, vanilla buy-to-let doesn't work. You can't simply pick up a 2-bedroom flat which would be attractive to a first-time buyer. You can't buy that flat on a buy-to-let mortgage, put down a deposit, just rent it out as a 2-bedroom flat, and the figures stack up and it makes commercial sense. That doesn't work anymore. What we're doing these days is either buying larger properties and converting them into houses in multiple occupation, HMOs. Now, those are not first-time buyer properties. And of course, the other area that we're playing in is converting old defunct commercial buildings into residential use. If you take a former bank building or a defunct office building, then your average first-time buyer is not competing for that building. They're not looking to buy it. They're not in that game. And then you're taking that unloved, derelict, unused building, which has no utility in the marketplace, and you are taking your own entrepreneurial risk, putting your own capital at risk, converting it into a number of 1-bedroom flats or 2-bedroom flats or what have you, and providing that to the rented sector. Those are rented flats that never existed before. And of course, there's a lot of activity in people putting their own capital at risk to build purpose-built blocks of flats for rental housing. Now, those never existed in the first place, and you can hardly argue a case that these properties were taken away from first-time buyers. I would really like to see the evidence for that argument.
It's become quite popular again. It's not just those early 2000s programs, but it's also, it's popular again on social media.
Yeah, I think it never really went away, and some of them, they're just really bleak to watch. I think the original dream of these programs was that you looked around your dream home and everyone felt good about it, but now the host says, oh, what are you going to do with it? And they say, I'll just put a coat of paint on it and let it out. And the fact that you can go on TV and say that without feeling an enormous sense of shame is a very unhealthy sign.
Well, I think you should feel an enormous element of shame if you've been to law school, qualified as a barrister, and have views like that.
Yeah, I think I was watching something on TikTok just the other day. It was a girl who must have been about 28. She was explaining how you could make a home into an HMO.
Yeah. It's revolting.
Okay, so if you're that girl on TikTok who is making a house into an HMO, Good on you! Well done! Because what you are doing, of course, is creating badly needed rental housing. When you're renting those properties out, those rooms out in your HMO, I bet they're let instantly, they're not sitting on the shelf. That means there's demand for that kind of housing provision. And this 28-year-old has done a wonderful thing in not only creating additional rental units out there in that local marketplace, but bettering her own prospects in life by taking entrepreneurial risk, getting off her backside and making her own future bright and creating more rental housing at the same time. You should be proud of that. And in fact, that goes for all of you guys watching this video. You should be proud of what you do. Whether you're developing properties, you're repurposing defunct commercial properties for residential use, you're putting together HMOs, houses in multiple occupation, or you're providing badly needed rental sector homes. You are doing good. And you're also doing it in a way that makes you a little bit of profit too. And as I've explained in this video, according to NRLA research from their quarterly survey of 2,000 tenants, you independent landlords are doing a pretty good job at it as well. Far better than those social landlords out there. So don't listen to all this twaddle reported by Nick Bano in The Guardian. Remember, you're doing a mighty fine job, and stay tuned for more videos. Make sure you like, subscribe and comment for more. The Baker Street Property Meet is the UK's largest and #1 property investors networking event. The property market is going through monumental change right now, and at Baker Street Property Meet we aim to keep you up to date with the latest tips and tricks and insider tactics to help you keep on top of your property investing game and succeed in these troubled economic times. The Baker Street Property Meet is fundamentally about networking, because it's not what you know, it's who you know. And at Baker Street we aim to connect you with the people to make your property journey a monumental success. There's no better place to be to further your property investment journey than the Baker Street Property Meet. So make sure you're here, you're connecting with myself and Andrew Roberts, our expert guest speakers and 300 passionate property people each and every month. See you at the next meet. Get your spot at bakerstreetpropertymeet.com.